ugly sign comes down. Right now!
That's what the HOA president screamed before she yanked my private property sign out of the dirt and threw it across the hood of my truck. Behind her sat a 40-foot motorhome she'd parked on my land for 11 months, like it was a free RV lot. I had written 4 letters. I had posted 6 signs. I had paid the county to survey the boundary. She had ignored every single one of them, because she'd convinced her HOA board that the strip between her gate and my fence was community right-of-way. It was not. The deed was in my name. The taxes were in my name. The grant was in my grandfather's, signed in 1947. That's the thing about people drunk on HOA power. They start mistaking other people's land for amenities. What she didn't know was that I spent 28 years running a tow yard in Tennessee, and I know every line of state tow law by heart. So I didn't argue. I picked up my sign, walked back inside, and called Bo Macklin. Tell me below, what would you have done? My name is Travis Cantrell, and the strip of land the HOA was using as a free parking lot has been in my family since the spring of 1947. My grandfather bought it from a Franklin attorney named Tipton for $84 and a handshake. The deed is hand-typed on cotton bond paper, signed by Tipton, witnessed by 2 clerks, recorded at the Williamson County Courthouse, and updated 3 times across 4 generations. The strip runs along the eastern boundary of our family farm, 30 feet wide and just over 200 feet long. It hugs the gravel shoulder of Hollow Road and ends at the back corner of what used to be my granddaddy's tobacco barn. There are 6 pin oaks along that line, all of them planted by my father in 1971 to mark the property edge in case the road ever got widened. They never have widened it. The pin oaks are big now, the kind that hold their leaves into November and drop them all in one slow week. I'm 55 years old. I retired 18 months ago from a tow yard and recovery business I built from 1 wrecker truck in 1996 to a 6-rig operation with 2 yards, 14 employees, and a Class A wrecker license that covers every county between Nashville and Chattanooga. I sold the business to my dispatcher, a good man named Bo Macklin, who runs it now under the name Macklin Wrecker and Recovery. Bo and I still have coffee once a week at the diner on Murfreesboro Pike. He knows the law. I taught him the law. The man can recite Title 55 of Tennessee Code annotated from memory, the way other men recite scripture. I have a daughter named Sienna who lives in Nashville. She is 28, married to a kind man named Cole who works for the Parks Department, and they have a 4-year-old son named Beckett who calls me Papa Trav and asks every time he visits if he can ride in the front seat of a tow truck. The answer is always yes. I had a wife, too, Lorraine. She died 4 years ago, on a Tuesday in October, of a heart attack at 51. She had been making pumpkin bread that morning and was reaching for the cinnamon when her arm went numb. The cinnamon tin landed on the counter and rolled, the slow way a tin rolls when nobody is watching. She did not make it to the hospital. 4 years on, the smell of cinnamon still stops me in the middle of whatever I am doing. The kitchen smells like Lorraine. The land smells like my granddaddy. The barn smells like diesel and old leather and dog. I make peace with all of it most days. Most days are easier than the rest. After Lorraine passed, I sold the business and stayed on the farm. My grandfather's house is a 1936 Craftsman bungalow with a wraparound porch and a stamped tin ceiling in the kitchen. The land runs to 68 acres now, after a small piece was sold off in the 80s for a county utility easement. The eastern boundary, the one with the pin oaks and the deeded 30-foot strip, runs straight along Hollow Road. Across that road, until 2 years ago, there was nothing but pasture, a barbed wire fence, and a stand of cedars where the Bob Whites used to call in the evening. 2 years ago, a developer out of Brentwood named Trammell Locke broke ground on a 180-home subdivision called Magnolia Crossing. The houses are nice. They have stone fronts and 3-car garages and small fenced yards. The streets are named after flowers. The gate is brick and wrought iron, and has a sign on it that reads, Magnolia Crossing, a private community. The HOA was incorporated before the model home was finished. The first president of the board was a woman named Sherry Lockhart. Sherry is 49, heavy-set, blonde, the kind of woman who tints her sunglasses dark and wears them indoors. She drives a champagne gold Cadillac Escalade with a vanity plate that says, HOA Boss. Her husband Brent is a commercial real estate broker in Nashville and is rarely home. They moved into the largest lot in Magnolia Crossing, the one closest to Hollow Road, which means the closest to my fence line. From their kitchen window they could see, every morning, 6 pin oaks on a strip of grass that did not belong to them. By summer of the first year, they had a 40-foot Class A motorhome named the Lockhart Liner. It is one of those things that costs the price of a small house. They had nowhere to park it on their own lot because the HOA's own bylaws prohibit recreational vehicles on residential parcels in Magnolia Crossing, a rule Sherry had personally drafted 3 years earlier and now found inconvenient. So she parked it on my strip. The first time, I figured it was a mistake. People misjudge boundaries, especially next to a gravel shoulder. I walked over the next morning in work boots and a flannel shirt and explained the property line to Sherry's husband Brent, who nodded, apologized, and said they would move it that afternoon. He did not move it. I sent a letter the following Monday, polite and printed, explaining the deed line and asking the Lockharts to park the motorhome on their own lot or at a storage facility. No response. I sent a second letter, certified return receipt, in October. Sherry signed for it. I have the green card. She did not move the RV. I posted a private property sign on the strip in November. Sherry pulled it up. I posted 2 more in March. She pulled both up and laid them on my driveway like she was returning lost mail. By the 11th month, the Lockhart Liner had a propane line, a folding patio mat, a string of solar lanterns, and an outdoor TV mounted to its side. The morning she yanked my 6 sign out of the ground and threw it on my truck hood was a Friday in early April. The dogwoods along the south fence were just starting to crack their buds. The air smelled like cut grass and creek water. I picked the sign up, set it on the porch, called Bo Macklin, and told him to drive out for coffee. Bo arrived in 35 minutes with a thermos and a smile. We sat on the porch and watched the Lockhart Liner glint in the sun across my own grass. "Travis," Bo said, "you know exactly what to do." I told him I did. I told him I was going to do it the right way, the slow way, the documented way, because I was not going to give Sherry Lockhart a single inch of legal ground to stand on when the bill came due. Bo finished his coffee. He told me to call him when I was ready. He drove off down Hollow Road and his taillights disappeared into the morning haze. I went inside. I poured a fresh cup. I labeled a new binder on the spine in pencil, Magnolia Crossing. The binder was thin then. It would not stay thin. Sherry's first move after the sign incident was a stroke of HOA confidence, so brazen, it told me everything I needed to know about how this would go. She filed a formal complaint with the Williamson County Zoning Office, alleging that I was interfering with a community use easement on what her HOA had been treating for 2 years as common right-of-way. The complaint was 3 pages, single-spaced, printed on Magnolia Crossing HOA letterhead, with the Magnolia logo in the upper corner. It cited historical neighborhood usage and traditional shared access. It included a petition with 27 HOA member signatures, requesting that the county preserve the community amenity. It demanded that I cease and desist obstructing legitimate community functions on the eastern verge of Hollow Road. The county clerk, a woman named Pearl Gilchrist who had known my mother since high school, called me on a Thursday afternoon and asked me, in a voice carefully drained of editorial content, whether I would be coming in to provide a response. I told her I would be in the next morning, at 8 sharp, with the original deed, the 2007 survey, and 40 years of property tax receipts. I drove in the next morning at 8 sharp with all 3. Pearl looked through the documents at the counter for about 4 minutes. She made photocopies. She filed everything. She wrote a determination memo right there in front of me, in her own careful hand, and stamped it with the official county seal. The memo, in plain English, said this: the 30-foot strip on the eastern boundary of Hollow Road from milepost 4.6 to milepost 4.8 is private property held in fee simple by Travis Cantrell. No easement of any kind has ever been recorded. No public dedication exists. The HOA complaint is dismissed without merit. Any further enforcement action by the Homeowners Association regarding this parcel will be referred to county legal counsel. Pearl slid a copy of the memo across the counter to me. "Travis," she said, If that woman comes in here one more time, I am going to make her sit on the chair by the door until she has read every word of this memo 3 times out loud. I told her that was approximately what I had in mind. I drove home with the memo on the seat next to me. I made a notarized copy at the FedEx in Franklin. I mailed Sherry Lockhart a copy by certified return receipt that afternoon. I added the green card to my binder when it came back 4 days later with her looping signature on the back. Sherry did not move the motorhome. She did not even slow down. 2 weeks after Pearl's memo arrived in her mailbox, Sherry organized a community rights next door campaign that made the front page of the Magnolia Crossing private group within 48 hours. The post was 800 words. It accused me of being a hostile newcomer to the corridor. Never mind that my family had been on this land for 76 years, and her subdivision had broken ground 23 months ago. It accused me of weaponizing private property to attack the community. It accused me of stripping the neighborhood of its historic open space. It claimed that the deed I had filed was potentially fraudulent. That word, fraudulent, appeared 3 times in the post. A woman named Geraldine Whitmer, the retired Marine wife who lived 4 houses down from the Lockharts, called me that same evening. Geraldine had moved into Magnolia Crossing the previous summer, had served 18 years as a Marine sergeant before retiring as a contracting officer, and was, by my read in the one previous conversation I had with her at the mailboxes, one of the few sane voices on the entire HOA board. "Travis," she said, "I just want you to know 2 things. First, the post is not playing well with the people who matter. The veterans on this board are reading it the way you would expect veterans to read it. Second, if you choose to take the next step, whatever it is, I would like to be standing on the right side of the line when you do." I thanked her. I asked her to keep an ear to the ground. I told her I would let her know when the time came. What I did not tell her, because I did not yet know it myself, was that the time was already coming, and Sherry Lockhart was the one writing the schedule. That same week, Sherry ran a new line. She had a propane plumber run a permanent gas line from her own residence, across the gravel shoulder, under my fence, and up to a hookup on the side of the motorhome. She did this without consulting me, without consulting Williamson County, and without consulting the utility easement registry. She installed an outdoor TV bracket and a small string of festoon lights on the roof of the Lockhart liner. She added a wooden lattice screen along the front of the parking spot, presumably so the motorhome would look more like a permanent installation. Her own residence's bylaws would have made every one of these modifications a violation if she had done them on her own lot. She had transferred the violations to my land instead. I went out one evening at golden hour to take fresh photographs for the binder. Sherry saw me through the windshield of the motorhome. She rolled down the window and leaned out with a glass of white wine in her hand. "Travis," she called, in a voice meant to carry across the property line. "This is going to be so much easier if you just accept that the neighborhood needs this space." I lowered my camera. I gave her a small, polite nod, the kind a man gives when he is making sure the woman across from him remembers him later in a deposition. Then I went back inside and sat at my kitchen table with the binder open in front of me. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon. I let it. I poured a cup of coffee. I started writing the next phase of the plan. By the 3rd week of April, Sherry had stopped pretending the strip was anyone's but hers. The Lockhart liner had become a second residence. She held what she called RV cocktail hour on Tuesday evenings, with 3 or 4 neighbors invited up onto the patio mat at sundown to drink Chardonnay and listen to a Bluetooth speaker she had mounted to the side of the coach. The lattice screen was painted dove gray. The festoon lights were on a timer that came up at 7:15. The propane line fed a small grill she had set up at the rear bumper. On Saturday nights, when Brent was home, the volume on the outdoor TV climbed high enough that my blue-tick coonhound Earl would walk to the porch door and look at me with the patient, weary expression of a dog who had endured worse but was tired of polite. The Sunday I decided to act, Sherry threw a karaoke night. It started at 9 in the evening. It ran past midnight. The chosen song selection included 3 separate renditions of a Shania Twain ballad I had once liked. Earl gave up on me around 11, climbed into his bed by the wood stove, and sighed so deeply I thought he might pass out from disappointment. I sat on the porch in the dark with a glass of bourbon and my reading light, and I worked through the Tennessee Code annotated on a printout I had spread across the porch table. I read every line of Title 55, Chapter 16, twice. I read the relevant sections of Title 66 on real property. I read the case law citations Bo had texted me earlier in the week. By the time the karaoke wrapped up at 12:38 in the morning, I had the entire framework written out in pencil on a yellow legal pad. Here is the law, in plain language, the way I would have explained it to one of my new drivers on his first day at the yard. In Tennessee, a private property owner has the right to designate his own land as a private tow zone. The statute is Tennessee Code Annotated Section 55-16-103. To do it correctly, 3 things have to be in place. First, the property owner must enter into a written authorization agreement with a licensed wrecker service that is registered with the state. Second, the property must be posted with conforming signage at clearly visible intervals, each sign meeting specific size, color, and content requirements set by the statute. Third, the property owner must file the authorization with the local sheriff's office before any tow occurs, so that law enforcement has a record. Once those 3 things are in place, any vehicle parked on that private property without the owner's consent is subject to removal by the contracted wrecker service, at the vehicle owner's full expense, including hookup, mileage, storage, and administrative fees. The takeaway is simple. Your land, your rules, your tow zone, your bill. Tennessee gives a property owner more weight in this fight than most homeowners ever realize. That was the framework. The next morning, I started building it. The second piece of the case fell into place by accident, which is how the best ones always do. I was at the diner with Bo Macklin on a Tuesday morning when my phone buzzed with a text from Sienna. She had been scrolling a vacation rental site looking for somewhere to take Beckett for his 5th birthday weekend, and a listing in the suggested feed had caught her eye. The headline read, "Stay in our luxury Magnolia Crossing RV, private community setting." The thumbnail was a photograph of the Lockhart liner, parked on my strip, with my pin oaks visible in the background. The listing address read 320 Hollow Road, Franklin, Tennessee. That is my address, my grandfather's address, the address printed on every property tax statement going back to 1947. Sienna sent me the screenshot. She sent me the listing URL. She sent the words, "Dad, is this you?" It was not me. It was Sherry Lockhart, renting out her motorhome on a vacation platform, listed at my address, parked on my land, while I paid the property taxes on the ground underneath her hookups. I drove home from the diner. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the listing. There were 143 guest photographs, an average rating of 4.6 stars, 11 verified completed rentals over the previous 6 months, and a host profile under the name S. Lockhart, with a smiling photograph of Sherry in a sun hat. The nightly rate was $210. The cleaning fee was $85. Estimated gross revenue from the 11 stays, by my back-of-envelope math, was just under $3,000. None of that revenue had been reported to the Tennessee Department of Revenue as short-term rental lodging tax, which a private operator is required to do in this state once they exceed 3 rentals in a calendar year. I screenshotted every page. I saved every photograph. I downloaded the entire listing as a PDF. I printed a clean copy at the FedEx in Franklin and added it to the binder behind a fresh tab labeled Commercial Use. Sherry Lockhart had been operating an unlicensed short-term lodging business out of a recreational vehicle parked illegally on private property she did not own, in violation of her own HOA bylaws, in violation of her RV insurance policy, in violation of state lodging tax law, and using my street address as the listing location. That was not just a fight over a parking spot anymore. That was, in the legal parlance, exposure. Hers, not mine. Over the next 3 weeks, I built the tow zone the way you build a foundation. Slow, square, to code. The first piece was the authorization. Bo Macklin and I sat down at the diner with 2 cups of coffee and a clean copy of the state-approved wrecker authorization form. We filled in every line: property owner, property description, GPS coordinates, wrecker service license number, Class A heavy recovery certification number, signage compliance attestation. Bo signed for Macklin Wrecker and Recovery as the contracted operator. I signed as the fee simple owner. We notarized both signatures at the bank across the street. We made 4 certified copies. I drove one of them to the Williamson County Sheriff's Office that same afternoon and handed it to the records clerk, a kind woman named Imogene Hartwell, who had clerked there for 31 years. She date-stamped my file copy in front of me and gave me an official receipt. The tow authorization was live, on file, and enforceable. The second piece was the signage. Tennessee statute requires specific specs. Each sign must be at least 18 inches by 24 inches, posted no higher than 6 feet from the ground, at intervals not greater than 100 feet along the property boundary, with red lettering at least 3 inches tall, reading, "Tow Zone, Private Property, Unauthorized Vehicles Subject to Immediate Towing at Owner's Expense," along with the wrecker service name, 24-hour phone number, and the Tennessee Code section citation. I drove down to a sign shop in Spring Hill and ordered 6 of them, fabricated in heavy aluminum with reflective vinyl. They were ready in 9 days. I picked them up on a Thursday afternoon and laid them in the bed of my truck under a green tarp. The third piece was the binder. By the time I was ready to post the signs, the binder was 1.5 inches thick. It contained the deed, the survey, the property tax receipts, the 4 certified letters to the Lockharts with their return receipts, the photographs of every sign Sherry had pulled up, the county zoning determination from Pearl Gilchrist, the propane line photographs, the festoon lights photographs, the vacation rental listing, all 11 rental bookings, the screenshot of Sherry's host profile, and the entire string of Nextdoor posts she had written calling me a fraud. I added 2 pages to the binder every day. By the end of the month, the binder had its own thumb-indexed tabs. I called the Tennessee Department of Revenue Lodging Tax Division on a Wednesday afternoon. I spoke to a senior auditor named Tilda Brennan. She listened. She asked for the listing URL. She asked for the address. She asked for my evidence of unreported rentals. She read me a brief summary of the state's recovery powers, which included back taxes, penalties, interest, and discretionary fines. She told me her office would be opening a file. She gave me a case number. I wrote it down in the margin of my legal pad in pencil. I called the RV insurance company Sherry had used, which I had identified from a sticker visible on her windshield in 3 of the listing photographs. I did not give my name. I asked a hypothetical question about commercial use of an insured recreational vehicle. The agent told me, on a recorded line, that commercial rental of a personal use RV without a separate commercial policy was an immediate and total voidance of coverage. The Lockhart liner, by that hour of that Wednesday, was an uninsured vehicle. Sherry did not yet know it. I called Geraldine Whitmer, the retired Marine. I asked her one quiet question. I asked her whether the Magnolia Crossing HOA bylaws had a provision prohibiting member-operated commercial businesses on community property. She read me the section by heart. She told me she would bring a printed copy to my mailbox by sundown. She did. The copy arrived in a clean white envelope with no return address. I added it to the binder behind a tab labeled Bylaw Violation. I posted the signs on a Saturday morning at first light with Bo's help. We measured every interval with a 50-foot tape. We sank each post to 30 inches. We took photographs of each finished sign with the date stamp visible on the camera. We mailed Sherry a notarized notice of the new tow zone, by certified return receipt, hand-delivered to her mailbox by the postal carrier at 1 in the afternoon. The green card came back 4 days later with her signature, dated and timed. I added it to the binder. Sherry did not move the motorhome. She didn't read the signs. She didn't acknowledge the letter. She drove past the new posts every morning on her way to spin class and never once turned her head. She had been operating with impunity for so long that the words tow zone on a sign meant less to her than the weather. That was fine. That was exactly the position I needed her in. I waited 2 more weeks. I let her schedule what she was going to schedule. I let her invite who she was going to invite. I let her dig the hole exactly as deep as she wanted, because Tennessee law does not require an owner to warn a trespasser more than once they have already been notified. The signs were the notice. The certified letter was the notice. The sheriff's office had the notice. The clock was running on her, not on me. The bourbon I poured the night the signs went in was the smoothest one I had tasted in 4 years. I sat on the porch with Earl at my feet and watched the moon rise over the pin oaks. The land was quiet. The motorhome was dark. Sherry's festoon lights were off because she had run the battery down karaokeing the night before. The trap was set. All she had to do now was be Sherry Lockhart. She did not disappoint. The first move came on a Tuesday. Sherry filed a formal motion with the Magnolia Crossing HOA board to annex the Eastern Verge corridor under what she described as historical community use. She claimed her HOA had achieved a claim of neighborhood adverse possession through continuous and notorious recreational use over the preceding 2 years. She brought, as her evidence, photographs of the RV cocktail hours, screenshots of the next-door community posts, and a notarized statement from 4 board members attesting that the Strip had always been considered a community amenity. Adverse possession in Tennessee requires 20 years of continuous, open, hostile, and exclusive use under TCA Section 28-2-101 and related case law. 2 years of HOA cocktail parties does not meet that standard. The motion was so legally illiterate that Pearl Gilchrist at the county clerk's office laughed out loud when Sherry walked it in. Pearl stamped it received. Pearl filed it in the public record. Pearl mailed me a courtesy copy with a yellow sticky note attached that said only, "Bless her heart." I added it to the binder. The second move came 2 days later. Sherry's husband Brent placed a phone call to a friend of his who worked at the Williamson County Sheriff's Office in administrative support. He asked the friend if there was any way to get a deputy out to talk some sense into a problem resident on Hollow Road. The friend was not authorized to dispatch a deputy. He passed the request up. A deputy was sent, more out of courtesy to the county than to Brent, on a Wednesday afternoon. The deputy who pulled into my drive was a young woman named Marlo Pennington. She was 26 years old, 3 years into the job, and had grown up 2 miles east of my farm. Her aunt was a friend of Lorraine's from the church choir. Deputy Pennington stepped out of her cruiser in her brown uniform, with her hat tucked under her arm. She looked at the binder I had set out on the porch railing. She looked at me. She looked back at the binder. "Mr. Cantrell," she said, "I am only here because somebody asked somebody who asked somebody. I am going to walk around the property, take 3 minutes of notes, log this visit as resolved, and leave. I'd appreciate if you didn't make me write more than that." I told her I would not. She walked the perimeter. She read the signs. She photographed 2 of them with her department-issued phone. She came back to the porch and said one thing very quietly before she left. "Sir, my uncle is the sheriff. He is the only deputy on this property who comes here next, and he'll come because of something Mrs. Lockhart did, not you." She drove off. I added her body cam timestamp to the binder. The third move was the one that gave me the whole stage. Sherry announced the inaugural Magnolia Crossing Founders Cookout for Memorial Day Saturday, 8 days out. The event was advertised across the entire Nextdoor community group, all 4 neighboring HOAs, the country club mailing list, and the Williamson County Weekend Events Bulletin. The flyer promised live music, a portable bar, valet parking, 100 RSVPs, 3 smokers running brisket and pulled pork, and what Sherry described as a ribbon cutting on our newly reclaimed community greensward. She included a glossy rendering of where each tent and table would sit. The rendering placed everything, every tent, every table, every smoker, every speaker, every chair, every guest, on my deeded strip of land. The Lockhart liner sat at the center of the rendering like a parade float. To accommodate setup, Sherry arranged for 2 additional travel trailers to be brought in by board members, a flatbed with a vintage tractor parked decoratively at the entrance, 2 boat trailers hauled in from a member's lake house, and a portable bar trailer hauled in by a Nashville rental company. She arranged with the valet company to use the south end of my strip as overflow parking for Saturday morning setup crew vehicles. She personally posted a hand-lettered sign at the entry of the strip that read, "Welcome to our community lawn. Founders Cookout. Setup in progress." She did all of this on land she did not own, in defiance of a county zoning determination, a posted tow zone, a certified return receipt notice, and her own bylaws. I read the Nextdoor announcement at the kitchen table with my coffee. I read it twice. I leaned back in the chair. Earl, on the floor at my feet, looked up at me with one ear cocked. "Earl," I said, "I believe she has just delivered the whole load." He thumped his tail twice. He went back to sleep. I called Bo Macklin. I asked him 3 questions. How many trucks could he have in position by 05:30 on Saturday morning? How many heavy-duty wreckers did he have certified for a 40-foot Class A coach? And how long would it take, end to end, to relocate 9 vehicles to his yard? Bo did not hesitate. 3 trucks, 2 heavy-duty, hook up to last departure in under 90 minutes if we move clean. I told him to be at my driveway at 5:15 Saturday, with coffee in his hand and his paperwork in the other. He said he would not miss it for the world. I made one more call. I called Sheriff Beauregard Pennington, the deputy's uncle, on his direct office line. I introduced myself by name. I gave him the date, the time, the property description, the tow authorization number on file with his own clerk, and the signage compliance certificate. I told him there would be a legal private property tow at 0600 Saturday, and that, given the size of the planned cookout, I would appreciate his department being aware, in case the situation required peacekeeping after the fact. He was quiet for about 3 seconds. Then he chuckled, very low. "Mr. Cantrell," he said, "I have been a sheriff in this county for 16 years. I have wanted to see this tow happen for at least 11 of them. We will be ready." Memorial Day Saturday broke clean and cool. The dogwoods along the south fence were in full bloom, white as paper plates against the pine green of the cedar brake behind them. The air smelled like fresh hay and creek water, and somebody's bacon 2 pastures over. The sun came up over the pin oaks at 6:02. By that hour, Bo Macklin's 3 wreckers were already on Hollow Road. The lead truck was a Peterbilt 389 with a Century 1075S rotator on the back, capable of lifting 107,000 pounds, more than enough for the Lockhart liner. The second was a Kenworth T880 with a 35-ton Vulcan integrated body. The third was a Freightliner with a Jerdan steel rollback for the boat trailers and tractor flatbed. They lined up nose to tail along the shoulder of Hollow Road like a small parade. The diesel engines idled low. The yellow strobe lights spun against the morning fog. Bo stepped out of the lead truck with 2 paper coffee cups and a clipboard. He handed me a cup. He handed me the clipboard. The clipboard held the tow authorization, the signage attestation, the sheriff's office filing receipt, the property deed, and the county zoning determination. Every page was certified. Every page had a date stamp and a notary seal. Sheriff Pennington's department cruiser pulled in 3 minutes later. Bo Pennington himself stepped out, in uniform, a tall man in his late 50s with a gray mustache and the kind of slow blue eyes that have seen everything once. He walked the strip. He read the signs. He counted them. He came back to where Bo and I stood. "Mr. Macklin," he said, "your authorization is on file with my office. Your signage meets statute. The property owner has provided certified notice. You are clear to proceed. I will remain on site in case the community responds with energy." He stepped back to the cruiser, leaned against the hood, and crossed his arms. Bo nodded to his 2 drivers. The lead Peterbilt rolled forward and lined up on the Lockhart liner. The hookup was clean. The liner had been parked in the same spot for 11 months. The leveling jacks were set on small wooden blocks. The propane line ran underneath. The drivers, working with the practiced efficiency of men who had each been doing this for 15 years, disconnected the propane at the regulator, pulled the leveling blocks, set the recovery wheel skates under the axles, and winched the coach onto the trailer in 17 minutes. The rotator extended. The coach lifted 4 feet. The wrecker eased it forward. The Lockhart liner moved off my land for the first time in 328 days. The 2 travel trailers came next, then the flatbed with the tractor, then the boat trailers. Then, because Sherry's husband had parked his Mercedes and her Cadillac Escalade at the south end of the strip the night before to claim the valet space, both passenger vehicles were hooked and towed as well. 9 vehicles in 83 minutes. The wreckers rolled out down Hollow Road in convoy, lights flashing, headed for Bo's yard in Spring Hill. Sherry Lockhart arrived at 6:56. She came in her husband Brent's pickup because both of their personal vehicles were now on the back of Bo Macklin's wreckers. She was in a cream sundress, gold sandals, and pearl earrings. She was holding a clipboard. The first thing she saw was the empty strip. The second thing she saw was Sheriff Pennington leaning against his cruiser with a cup of coffee. The third thing she saw was me, in clean jeans and a blue work shirt, standing at my gate with the binder in one hand and the receipt copy of the tow authorization in the other. She stopped the pickup at an angle in the middle of the road. She got out without closing the door. She marched up to me with her clipboard raised, like she had used the gesture in every fight of her life. "Where," she said, "is my motorhome?" "Mrs. Lockhart," I said, "your motorhome and 8 other vehicles parked without authorization on private property are at Macklin Wrecker and Recovery in Spring Hill. The release fee for the Class A coach is $2,400. Storage is $125 per day. The release fees for the other vehicles range from $1,100 to $1,500 each." She turned to the sheriff. "Bo," she said, her voice climbing, "you cannot let him do this. This is theft. This is harassment. This is a hostile attack on our community." Sheriff Pennington took a long, slow sip of his coffee. "Mrs. Lockhart," he said, "I am going to read you the relevant section of Tennessee Code, and then I am going to read you the second one, and then we are going to talk about lodging tax." He pulled out his department phone. He read aloud, slowly and clearly, TCA Section 55-16-103 in full. He read TCA Section 67-4-1402, the lodging tax statute. He paused. He looked at her over the rim of his coffee cup. "Ma'am, the tow was legal. The wrecker is licensed. The signs meet code. The authorization was on file at my office. The owner of this property has been more patient with you than the law required. Now, I would like to talk to you about an Airbnb listing at 320 Hollow Road that was, until this morning, advertising an RV your family does not have a commercial license to operate." The clipboard came down to her side. Her mouth opened. It closed. It opened again. No words came out. 40 feet away, 3 of her board members had come walking up Hollow Road in cookout shirts. Behind them, the catering truck had pulled in. Behind the catering truck, the first guests were arriving in early bird sedans, slowing as they passed the empty strip, slowing more as they noticed the sheriff's cruiser, slowing more as they noticed Sherry Lockhart standing in the middle of the road, with no makeup on her face that hadn't smeared. I held out my hand to the sheriff. He passed me his coffee cup so I could hold it while he took a folder from Bo Macklin. "Mrs. Lockhart," I said, "enjoy your Memorial Day." Sherry tried, for about 40 more seconds, to argue. She told the sheriff he was making a mistake. She told me I was going to be sued. She told a passing guest, who was carrying a folding chair across the gravel, that the entire event was still on, and we just need to regroup. The guest looked at the empty strip, looked at Sherry, looked at the sheriff, and quietly walked the folding chair back to her car. Sheriff Pennington listened to all of it. When Sherry finally ran out of breath, he held up one hand. "Mrs. Lockhart," he said, "you are welcome to dispute any of this in court. You may want to know that the standard filing for a wrongful tow in this state requires you to first pay the impound and storage fees in full, and then sue for recovery. The motorhome is currently accumulating storage at $125 per day. Tennessee's lodging tax interest accumulates at a separate rate. I am required by code to inform you of both." She turned to Brent. Brent had his hands in his pockets and was looking at the ground. He did not look up. The sheriff gave her another long moment to speak. She did not. He nodded once, the way men nod when a conversation is over. "Mr. Cantrell," he said, "I'll be on my way. Call my office if anything else develops. And son, 10 years from now, when somebody asks me to name the cleanest tow zone I ever saw posted in this county, I am going to tell them about today." He drove off down Hollow Road. The cookout did not happen. By 8 in the morning, the catering company had loaded its smokers back onto the truck and driven off. The DJ canceled by text. The valet company collected its cones. The 47 guests who had already arrived stood in scattered clumps on the gravel shoulder, talking in low voices, looking at the empty strip and then at the sheriff's cruiser, and then at the empty strip again. By 10, the only vehicles still on Hollow Road were mine, the sheriff's, and Brent Lockhart's pickup, with the driver's door still hanging open. Over the next 4 days, 4 of the towed vehicles were recovered. The 2 HOA board members, whose travel trailers had been hauled in for the cookout, paid Bo Macklin a total of $3,000, $200 between them. The boat trailer owner paid $1,170. The flatbed tractor owner paid $1,420. Bo handled the paperwork himself. Per my authorization agreement, I received the standard property owner authorization fee on each tow, which Tennessee law permits and which the Wrecker Service contract spells out in plain English. By the following Friday morning, $14,247 had been wire transferred from Macklin Wrecker into my farm account. The number sat on the screen of my laptop for a long minute when I opened the banking app that morning. $14,247, the price of 11 months of ignored signs, 4 certified letters, 6 pulled posts, a county zoning fight, and 1 karaoke night that broke a dog's patience. It felt, more than anything, like the price of being heard. I closed the laptop. I walked outside in my socks. The dogwoods were starting to bloom. Earl came down the porch steps and sat next to me with his hip against my knee. We watched the strip for a while. The grass was already growing back where the leveling jacks had pressed into it. By midsummer, you would not have known the Lockhart liner had ever been there. Sherry Lockhart did not recover her motorhome. The release fee, the storage fee, the lodging tax back assessment, the insurance non-renewal letter, and a separate notice from the Tennessee Department of Revenue arrived at her house in the same week. Her insurance company refused to cover the recovery costs because of the commercial use voidance. The Department of Revenue assessed back lodging tax plus penalties of just under $5,000. The HOA board, in its first independent vote in 8 years, removed Sherry as president by a count of 14-2. The Lockhart liner sat in Bo's yard for 42 days, then went to auction. It sold for $112,000 to a buyer in Knoxville. Bo, after release fee deductions and Tennessee statutory auction proceeds rules, sent a check to me for $9,400 more, which I added to the original 14. I used the money. The first thing I did was set up the Lorraine Cantrell Memorial Veterans Vehicle Repair Fund at my late wife's church in Franklin. The fund pays for car and truck repairs for low-income veterans in Williamson and surrounding counties. No questions asked beyond a DD 214 and a written estimate. The first 3 checks went out in July. By Veterans Day that year, the fund had paid for 46 repairs across 9 counties, with Bo Macklin's shop providing parts and labor at cost. The second thing I did was donate $5,000 to the Franklin High School FFA chapter, my granddaddy's old chapter, to update their welding shop and pay for state convention travel for 3 students who otherwise wouldn't have been able to go. The third thing I did was take Beckett out for ice cream and a ride in a real wrecker. Bo let him pull the lever that drops the boom. Beckett laughed for 15 minutes straight. That afternoon was worth more than $14,000 to me. It was worth all of it. Geraldine Whitmer was elected the new HOA president of Magnolia Crossing in June. She rewrote the bylaws in her first 30 days. The new bylaws prohibit board members from parking commercial or recreational equipment outside their own lot lines, require quarterly financial disclosure, and include a clause expressly recognizing the property rights of adjacent landowners. She and I have coffee on the porch once a month. She brings the biscuits. Earl approves. I planted a row of native dogwoods along the eastern boundary of my strip, 200 feet long, 20 trees in a single straight line, in memory of my granddaddy, who set the original pin oaks. Behind the dogwoods, I had a black iron fence installed, 4 feet tall, post and rail. The fence has a brass plate at the south end that reads, Cantrell Family Farm, 1947. The new tow zone signs are bolted to the fence at code-required intervals. They will be there long after I am gone. So that is the story. A woman who decided she could park her motorhome on my land because she could not park it on her own, called every neighbor she had to back her up, ran a commercial rental business off my address, and ignored every legal notice she was sent until the day her own party became the venue for her removal. If you have ever been pushed off your own land by an HOA, a developer, or a neighbor who confused entitlement with authority, drop your story in the comments below. Tell me where you're watching from. The community in these comments is the best part of every video, and your story might be the next one I tell. If you stuck with me to the end and felt that wrecker line pull off the strip with the Lockhart liner on the back, do me one favor. Hit subscribe. Another HOA story drops next week, and I promise you it is just as wild. Until then, take care of your land, know your statute, and remember, in Tennessee, your property line is not a suggestion. It is the law.
Here's a lesson hidden inside Travis' control $14,000 morning. Sherry Lockhart did not fall because she met a lot of men. She fell because she met a more patient one. Travis spent 11 months getting every line of paperwork right while she spent 11 months acting like paperwork didn't apply to her. By the time the records rolled in, the fight was already over. She just haven't noticed yet. The real takeaway is this: if a neighbor, an HOA, or anybody else is using the land like it's theirs, you have more power than you think. In most states, a property authorized private town zone with code-compliant signage and license record ends the problem in one morning. The sign do the work, the state does the talking, the record does the rest. Call a property attorney, call a licensed town company, build the fire. The law is built for the owner who resists, not the trespasser who sounds. If you have lived through your own HOA nightmare, drop it in the comments. I read everyone. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story, where a retired pipefitter takes on a boat that condemned his late father's workshop. Until then, mind your recourse, mind your fence line, and remember, the sign that misstates is louder than any voice on next door.